This is our third Advent story, and this is also about a saint. This week is about Saint Lucy. And before we start, you just have to know that scale doesn't matter. So here's our Lucy, and she lives in this nice little house full of big money. So size doesn't matter. You just make it work in your head. Use your imagination, just as you do for the face. You're going to have to imagine what Lucy really looked like. And finally, we bring each story to us with a song. Sing me a song of saints, saints that are bold and true. Sing me a song of saints that lived like me and you. And because it's Advent, and this is our third week of Advent, we're going to light 3 candles on our wreath. If you had purple and pink candles, you'd have 3 purples and 1 pink. And this is the Sunday that you would light the pink candle. It's called the Gaudete candle. And this one is for joy. So a very long time ago, if you were here last week, you heard how long ago St. Nicholas lived. Well, St. Lucy lived at the same time. So 300 years AD, that's 1700 years ago. Again, 50 generations of grandmothers ago. You have to get all the way back to our St. Lucy, whose story is still remembered. Now, Lucy didn't start out as a poor girl. She started out as a rich girl. Her mother and father had a great deal of money, and she had everything she wanted. Lucy's mother went to church with Lucy a lot when she was a little girl, and Lucy believed very, very deeply in God, and she believed in Jesus Christ. Now, in her time, Jesus Christ hadn't been gone that long, and the authorities were still sort of roiled up, kind of ticked off at this Jesus and all of his followers, who were taking strength away from the emperor who had nothing to do with Jesus Christ. So the authorities, and there were lots of soldiers in this world, the authorities were very much against people like Lucy, who believed in Christ, and her mother, who also did. Anyway, Lucy grew up. She's absolutely breathtakingly beautiful, and she has all this money in her home and her pockets and just everywhere. She's about 20 years old now, and a young centurion has sort of been appointed, a young soldier has been picked out to marry Lucy for a couple of reasons. First, it'll sort of take away some of that Christian business that's going on in Lucy's head. And second, because he could use the money, and then the money would go to the emperor, and the emperor always needed money. What nobody knew about Lucy was that her heart was very much with the poor. Secretly, she'd been giving away her money, buying food for the poor who lived in another part of town. And she would go at night. Secretly, she went to visit the poor who lived in the rocks, in caves, distant from the wealthy little town. Now, when she went, she would have bought things, bread and food, all sorts of things to put in baskets, clothing, all the things that they might need. And so she needed both of her arms to carry the goods that she had with her. That meant she didn't have really her hands, and it was dark. St. Lucy's story takes place about this time of year when the days are getting shorter and the nights are getting longer. Lucy would go with her arms full. Some say trays, some say baskets. One story or another. We'll light it on the 3rd candle. She'd have candles on her head to light her way. You can see how much light that'll shed as she went to deliver food and clothing and all the things to the poor people who were really her friends. Many of them believed in Christ. Some of them were sick. All of them were hungry. And they were so grateful for Lucy's help. But someone saw her, or someone was jealous, or someone was just a snitch. And they told the story of what Lucy was doing. And one night, she was caught coming back from the village, from the caves where the poor people were living. Centurions sprang up out of nowhere and surrounded her so she couldn't get away. And our poor Lucy was going to be dragged off again to a house where a poor girl would have to work for all of her life, doing things she really didn't want to do. Well, they tried to drag her off to that poor house, and Lucy couldn't be moved. It was like she was made of rock. Her face was still her face, and everything. She was very, very human, but so heavy that these two big burly guys couldn't move her. They couldn't lift her. They couldn't push her. They couldn't nothing. Well, these guys are not nice. So their next thought was, well, Lucy's doing wrong. There were parts of the empire where Christians were getting beaten and fed to the lions, all sorts of terrible things, and that's the kind of headset these guys had. They thought, well, we'll just burn her where she is. So when they couldn't move her, they brought sticks all around her. They placed the sticks, and they tried to burn her alive. And one went to light a match. Couldn't light a match. The wood would not burn. They could not burn Lucy. Eventually, one of the centurions snagged a sword from somewhere, and Lucy was killed at the point of a sword. So, our third Sunday is about hope. Where's the hope in our Lucy story? The third Sunday's theme is joy. We've had hope and love, now joy. Lucy's story is all three, but you have to look at it sort of from the side. Imagine all of these years later, we still remember this young woman, and that her belief was so strong that it was her joy to defy everyone, to bring love where she knew it was needed. Lucy is the patron saint of sailors. Sailors thought when they were in the middle of the ocean, hundreds of years after Lucy had died, that she could calm the ocean for them and give them safety. Today there are celebrations in Sweden and Norway and Finland and very far northern countries where Lucy is the symbol of light. Lucy is the symbol that turns the darkness into light as our year changes from darkening days to lightening days as we get closer to the birth of Jesus and also spring. So Lucy's story is joy. It's the joy of love and believing in Christ so much. It's the joy of Mary waiting for her son, Jesus, to be born. And it's the joy of all of us, knowing how good it is to be in a world that can have harsh moments, but whose real purpose is love. Sing me a song of saints, saints that are bold and true. Sing me a song of saints who lived like me and like you.